Hi, welcome to Rebooted Mindset, formerly Rebooted the podcast. I'm your host, Alita Hernandez. Come join me every Wednesday and Sunday afternoon at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time to hear real-life conversations with experts around the world on how we can heal our body, mind, soul, and spirit. So let's get talking. Hi, everybody. Alita Hernandez here, Rebooted the podcast, and simultaneously will be aired on Nuestro magazine as well. I am here today with another fabulous guest, Cornelius Grove, an educator and author of On an Authority of Parenting Children Across Cultures. So it just sparked my interest, seeing that I'm bicultural. Somebody told me that the other day, because I'm Puerto Rican, first generation, born in New York, and we're also American. So we're not multicultural, but bicultural. So there's differences on, raising children and everything like that. So I'm curious on your take on this.
Well, hello, Alita. I'm glad to be here today. Thank you. I'm talking to you from Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
Where are you?
I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida right now.
Oh boy, I bet it's hot down there.
Oh, yes, it is.
It's also hot up here.
It's hot everywhere. Yeah, I'm originally from New York. I left in 1987 from New York, so I've been gone for a long time.
It's a great place to be, I think, New York. That's just my opinion.
Right. We all say that when we move here, that's for sure. Oh, okay.
So I was just turning up the volume so I could hear you a little bit better.
Oh, okay, no problem. So you're an educator, I see, and you have been teaching high school?
How far are we going back? I taught high school in the mid 1960s.
Oh, wow.
I haven't taught high school since then. I've done some university teaching at Columbia University and at the New School University. They're both here in New York, and at Beijing Foreign Studies University, which is in, of course, Beijing, China. Mm-hmm. You said that I'm an educator, and I am an educator. I don't disavow that at all. My doctorate is in education. But these days, I prefer to say that it's more accurate to say that I am an ethnologist. Now, it's easy to get ethnologist mixed up with ethologist. There's just one letter difference. An ethologist is a scholar who studies animals.
Okay.
I'm very pro-animal, but that's not what I am. An ethnologist is a scholar who compares and contrasts cultures. And that's basically what I have been doing as an author and as a scholar for well over 10, 12 years now. My previous two books, all of my recent books are published by Rowman and Littlefield. My previous two books very squarely compared the cultures of East Asia, that's China, Japan, Taiwan, Korea, Hong Kong, and so forth, with American culture with respect to children's learning in school. Well, it's not those two books are closely related to each other. I call them sister books. Those are not the books we're here to talk about today, but I'm ready to talk about them anytime. So both of those books were very, very squarely about what goes on in classrooms and how that might be, how our experience here in the United States might be improved in terms of how well our students learn in school classrooms and how well they retain what they do learn. But for this book that we're here to talk about today, and that's this book here, I decided I wanted to take a break from looking at school classrooms. By the way, I'm working on my fifth book now, and I'm right back into school classrooms. But so my break lasted there about 3 years. Um, I wanted to see what was going on with children and parents in societies in which there are no schools, or in which schools are just beginning to be introduced. And so that's what this book is about. We're looking at children, about just about everything goes on with children in these 5 traditional societies, other than that they go to school, because either just a few of them go to school, or there aren't even any schools anywhere nearby, and they couldn't possibly go to school.
Can you believe that it's 2013 and there's still places that have no schools?
Quite a few. So maybe I should tell you the 5 societies that I looked at. Now, let me just say that, so the question arises, well, how did you decide which traditional societies to look at? Yes, I don't know if I actually said these are, I looked at what's generally known as traditional societies, also sometimes known as indigenous societies.
Okay.
40, 50 years ago, we probably wouldn't have blushed to refer to them as primitive, or at least 1 or 2 of them. But we don't do that anymore, because that has overtones that really aren't accurate and that are prejudicial in some ways. So we don't use that word anymore. Traditional is a much more respectful term, and indigenous, of course, has a specific meaning, that they were always there, have been there for not just decades, but hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. So the 5 traditional society that I looked at, I was going to say how I chose them. Well, first of all, I want to be clear that I did not go to these societies myself and visit them and have a look. I didn't have to do that because anthropologists have already done that. In particular, I'm interested in a field of anthropology that's generally known as the anthropology of childhood. I had to choose societies that were traditional or indigenous on the one hand, and also in which anthropologists of childhood had gone and lived there and done their research, which is generally known as participant observation. That means that they basically show up and move in, and they live there, and they get involved, and they make friends, and they learn how to do, one of the most difficult things, certainly from my perspective, is they learn the language. Sometimes they're able to learn these languages to fluency before they get there, but other times, no. So that's a huge thing, at least from my language challenged brain. I have great respect for that.
You speak one language only?
Well, I've studied, I did my doctoral dissertation, I did a great deal of it in Portuguese. In those days, which is quite a few years ago now, my wife and I had lived in Portugal, and we had studied Portuguese. And so I was able to do quite a bit of the interviewing, although this was all in the United States, in Massachusetts, where there are a lot of Portuguese people.
I know.
I was able to interview students and parents and schools administrators and teachers when they preferred to speak Portuguese. I was able to interview them in Portuguese. And those interviews were sometimes quite long. But when it came time for those interviews to be transcribed, because I had recorded them, that was really beyond me. I hired an actual, truly bilingual person to do the transcript.
Right.
I also have spoken a little Chinese. I've also spoken a little Spanish. It took 3 years of German in college.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not unfamiliar with languages, but right now I have to say right now I'm monolingual. But I think if I moved back to Portugal or Brazil, I'd begin picking it up pretty quickly.
Right, the immersion, when you immerse yourself in the language, that's totally
You don't have any choice.
exactly.
You want to get your breakfast, you got to ask for it. So I had to find I had to find 5 societies in which anthropologists of childhood, specifically of childhood, had been there, lived there, and come back. When I say lived there, sometimes for more than a year, and then come back and written about it in books and in journal articles. And I had to be sure that the 5 societies that I wanted to deal with in this book, that I had sufficient information, not just one anthropologist. I had to have several. All right, I didn't want to rely entirely on one. And as good fortune had it, I found 5, and each one is on a different continent. So the first one I want to mention, and is, the first of the 5 chapters, is the Aka hunter-gatherers of Central Africa. Now, these are hunter-gatherers. This is pretty seriously traditional. No schools anywhere.
Wow.
No, they live in the forests of Africa, and you might say the jungle, and it's a very, very different life than what you or I, or probably anybody listening to this program, have ever lived. Certainly applies to me. I mean, I was a Boy Scout, but that has nothing.
That's nothing on them, that's for sure. They're out there with the little outfits and their spears, right? And they're out there like.
Well, when they go hunting, they have some spears. Yeah, that's true. So the second society was the Quechuas of the high Andes in Peru. And the picture on the cover of the book is of 3 Quechua girls.
Wow.
That was taken by an anthropologist who spent many, many, many months with the Quechua. They live at an altitude of 12,000 to 16,000 feet.
Oh,
that's where
wow.
they live. And things are pretty barren up there. So they got to worry about getting breakfast, lunch, and dinner as well. So where does that come from? The third one that I want to mention is be more familiar to, at least a name, to most of your listeners, I would think, and that's the Navajos of our own Southwest. A great deal of anthropological attention has been paid to the Navajos. The fourth one is the village Arabs of the Levant. Now, I know that not all of your listeners are going to immediately know what I mean about when I say the Levant. The Levant refers to, if you can imagine in your mind's eye where Israel and Palestine and Lebanon and Syria are, well, that's basically the Levant, the eastern end of the Mediterranean. And now the people in that case, they were living in houses in small villages, but they were the heirs of the Bedouin nomads. The Bedouin nomads are another fascinating group, and I really had hoped, excuse me, that I could find enough anthropological studies of children among the Bedouin nomads that I could make the nomads themselves the subject of this chapter, but that was not possible. However, these people that I did look at who have been studied quite often are the heirs of the nomads, and they maintain many of their traditions. And the fifth group is the the Hindu villagers of India. Now, India is a very, very multicultural place. When we hear about India in the news, we are hearing mostly about, big things, they do a lot of work in computers, and plenty of India is highly urbanized, but there certainly are parts of India, many parts of India, where people are still living a traditional lifestyle. They are not living in urban areas by any means. They're in small towns out far from the urban centers. And they have been very heavily studied by anthropologists. The children and the parents have all, been very heavily studied. So those are the 5 societies that I looked at.
So what were you looking for these different societies, these 5 societies? You were trying to find out a difference in between how they're learning versus American learning? Is that?
Well, I just said, look, here are 5 societies in which the children either don't go to school at all. Their parents, the older people in these societies, almost 100%, have never been in a classroom as a student. So you have a society that still remains largely illiterate. That is beginning to change. We all tend to think that's a good thing, but after you look at 5 societies like I did, you begin to say, well, this is a very mixed thing. Literacy is good in some ways, and in other ways, we have to think about it. Anyway, I wanted to see what was going on. I'm not sure I went in with yes. I was under contract with a publisher who published a great deal for educators, and I am an educator, and so I wanted to look at education. But here's the interesting thing. Education, the real meaning of education, does not mean schooling. Education is a much, much broader term that means child socialization. Children growing up. How do children growing up become adults? Think of all the things that they need to be able to do, learn how to do as they get older and older and older. All kinds of social norms and values and expectations that people have. In a traditional society, it's extremely important that they are able to contribute their labor and their knowledge and their expertise to simply having enough food on the table day after day, month after month, season after season. I think this is one of the things that really impressed me about traditional societies, and that is so different from our society. We just nip out to the supermarket, pick up what we need, come back home. It's in the fridge, it's in the pantry. We're done. I mean, we have to prepare it.
Right, but we have a lot of convenience. We have so much convenience in America.
And when you get into traditional societies like I did in order to write this book, I'm just so impressed with the incredible comfort and convenience that we have in our society.
Well, I tell you, I was raised in the summer. I was in Puerto Rico. My grandparents were living there. So as a young child, after my parents got divorced, I would spend 3 months of the year there. I lived in New York City, and then I spent my summers in the country in Puerto Rico. So talk about 2 different ends of culture. So when I first started going there, it was rough because I'm a city girl, right? I'm a city girl, I have supermarket, so now I'm in the country. So now I learned a lot of things since I was alone during the day with my grandmother. She had a farm. I used to feed the chickens. I used to take care of get the eggs from the chickens in the morning, go pick up fruit from all the trees that we had. And even till this day, it has molded me who I am, because I walk around South Florida and it's mango season. I'm picking mangoes off the trees and coconuts. I'm coming home with a backpack, I look what I got. Like I went foraging in the forest,
Well, this is a great example. This is a great example because one of the things that really stands out about children in traditional cultures is that even at a very young age, they begin to assist and support the family in getting the food it's needing, storing the food it's needing, and in other ways, helping to take responsibility for the survival and even the thriving of the family.
Yeah.
And that is such an important thing to look at and understand that I devoted an entire chapter to it. American parents, and I would imagine I've read accounts from other cultures too, like one sticks in my mind from Italy, for example, another highly industrialized technological culture. Parents have a lot of trouble getting their children to pitch in to assist around the house. Well, you know what? Traditional parents don't. Now, why is that? So you would have asked me this eventually, but the question arises, well, what can we look at these traditional societies and copy and bring into our society? And my answer is generally nothing. There's much more to say about nothing, but there is one thing and the reason there's nothing is because the circumstances in which they live are so utterly different from ours. And not just the physical, what they look at when they look out the door of their house, but even the way the families are structured. And this is something that you might be able to relate to as well in your own experience.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens with the children as a generalization, and I emphasize to you and to your listeners that I'm very aware that I'm speaking in generalizations, and not every single traditional society is exactly like this. Nevertheless, you look at a lot of traditional societies, and I've read, as I was getting ready to write this book, I read many other things that were about societies other than these five, and I read things that anthropologists had written in general about traditional societies. And you can generalize to a considerable extent. What's happened as a generalization is that when a child is born and until it's weaned, it receives incredibly intense attention from its mother. The father isn't usually involved so much. There are exceptions to that. But the mother, the child is pretty much with the mother 24/7, nursing on demand, et cetera, et cetera. But when nursing is over, something happens which just doesn't happen in our society. At that point, the parent's attitude is, it's not my job to raise this child. Not up to me. Well, okay, who is it then? The answer is this. Either very common is that the child is given to the next oldest sibling. The next oldest sibling, girls preferred, or a cousin, is responsible for the child. Not just sort of responsible while the parent runs off to the supermarket, not as a babysitter, but as the 24/7 responsible party for this child's welfare. We're talking about if they have diapers,
Wow.
changing diapers, cleaning bottoms, putting down for naps, or just deal whatever's going on. And whatever's going on isn't necessarily like what's going on in our society. The other thing that happens, and these two things can happen together, is that the child becomes a member of the children's group of the small town or settlement or camp where this family and some other families live. And the children form a group, a mixed age, mixed sex group that has the run of the area. Are they supervised by many of your listeners will want to know, well, they have the run of the area. What happens here? Do the adults take turns, looking out for these people, ensure they're safe? No, they don't worry about them. Well, what about these? What about if the kid picks up a knife or gets too close to the fire? It's not the adult's concern. The children have to learn this on their own. Maybe their sibling, gives them some advice, or maybe they just learn. I mean, there's accounts in the literature of children, 14, 15 months old, using quite a large knife to get some food off a branch or something like that.
Yeah, I've seen that on YouTube. I've seen other cultures that the children are like, there was one online that there's a little Asian boy and he's cooking, and he must be 3 years old or 4, and he see him cooking on the wok, and he did a whole meal.
Yeah.
Like adults don't know how to cook.
Well, the adults know how to cook, but this is one of the ways in which he is contributing to the welfare of the family.
Yeah.
And contributing in very meaningful ways, in ways that are useful, in ways that take the burden off the adults. Here's the really interesting difference. And I didn't discover this, but I certainly saw examples of it as I was learning about these 5 societies.
Mm-hmm.
In American society and other highly industrialized Western societies, the benefits flow from the parents to the children. We give children things. We give them toys. We give them protection. We give them a place to live. We give them a room of their own if we're one of the cultures which we think children have to have a room of their own. By the way, that's rather unusual and when you look at all cultures. So the practical benefits flow from the parents to the children. The children are on the receiving end. The parents are putting out time, energy, money, and anxiety to see that this child grows up content and happy and has a good childhood and so forth and so on. Give, 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 give. It's just the reverse in traditional societies. The benefits flow from the children to the parents. Why is this? Because to raise their own food and do everything that needs to be done to ensure the security and the sustenance of the family, and maybe even a little bit more than just sustenance, everybody's labor is needed. Every able-bodied person needs to contribute to this, beginning as soon as a child is able to toddle forward.
Oh, wow.
So what in the world can a child do when they're just after they've learned to walk? They may not even be weaned yet because
I know.
right?
Yeah.
Well, family is getting up in the morning. Somebody is building a fire. We got to have wood for the fire, right? That toddler is capable of going over there and picking up some twigs that are laying on the ground and bringing them for the fire. Responsibility number one. Aged grandparent, not able to get about so much anymore. He looks thirsty. A very small child is capable of getting a cup of some kind, putting water in it, and taking it to grandpa.
That's true. That's true.
Right? We're talking about very young children, and yes, they take. So one of my favorite stories, I really treasure this story, even though it didn't happen to me, but I read about it, and I know the anthropologist who told this story. So this is the anthropologist that looked at the Quechua highlanders in Peru. Mm-hmm. And when she first got there, she was, politely brought into a hut. And the family was, the parents, I guess, and maybe the grandparents or whoever was there, was busy doing some things so that she could be properly welcomed. I guess they were, I don't know, they were making tea, or I don't really know what they were doing, but they were busy. And there was a 3-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. The 3-year-old girl, without any prompting, went and got 2 cups, filled them with water, came back to the anthropologist, handed her 1 cup, and welcomed her. Or when people drink together like that, they have, there's a ritual saying that they share. Mm-hmm. And she said that ritual saying, and 3 years old.
Wow.
She took responsibility for welcoming the guest properly at age 3.
We need to teach our American kids to do that, please.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We're so busy giving them things and making sure they have fun.
We don't teach them.
Huh?
We're not teaching. We're just giving. See, like my family, we were raised from the Spanish side of it, right? So we're raised both English and Spanish, but we always had things to do. Like we were responsible for our own bed, or we're responsible for our clothes, or make sure your shoes are clean. We just certain responsibilities. I've been cooking since I was 11 years old. I've been cooking. I learned how to cook for my grandmother, and now I cook for my mother, So, those are the traditions, like you're saying, traditions that we had, that we, generation over generation, even though they assimilated, right? Because they came from the island to New York, and they assimilated, but there were still family traditions that they taught us. Yeah. So, and I taught my kids how to clean, like they clean their own bathroom. They know how to make their bed, just different things. So I used to tell them all the time, because I was married for a period of time, and then I had raised them as a single mother, even though their father was involved. But still, I was home with 2 kids by myself. It wasn't easy. So it was like everybody has to pitch in. I'm like, you go clean this bathroom, you go do that. I showed them how to do it. They're like, okay, mommy, and they would help me. I go clean the dining room table. So I engaged them in life.
Well, you in your own experience as a child and as a single parent have picked up on some of the things that I like to point out from my reading and writing this book. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of what my chapter on responsibility is about. And that is, if you want here's what happens, I think, in many American families. They're giving their children things and experiences, and making sure they have fun, and making sure they're well fed, and worrying about them and protecting them. And this is pretty much 24/7 unless they get a babysitter for a little while. And then the child is growing up and things get even busier. Maybe there's another child. Maybe one of the parents or both of the parents has more demanding job, which is great because they bring in more money, blah, blah, blah. And things get kind of frantic in the household. And so you have this 13-year-old kid and the parents thinking, oh, how am I all these things that need to do? You know what? she could help out here. She could take out the garbage. She could, put the dishes away. And what many parents find out about at that point is the child doesn't want to do it. Well, why? They don't have any experience. They've just continually been given things. Here's the thing about traditional parents, traditional families, not just parents. Traditional families need children. They need them. American parents love children, and so do traditional parents. Traditional parents need children in practical, real life ways. American parents don't. So we just give. And another thing that traditional parents need is when they get older and they begin to become infirm and not be able to contribute so much, they need the children to take care of them.
Exactly.
Well, we've institutionalized that in our society, haven't we? We go off to, we don't want to trouble our children. We want to.
Well, a lot of children don't even want to take care of their parents. So,
exactly.
Another example, my grandmother, we took care of grandma. She died at home at 90.
Yeah.
And right now my mother's 85, my aunt is 83. They both have memory issues. During 2020, I moved in with them at the house. We have enough room. We all live together, and I have a business, do this, the podcast, and I still take care of my mother and my aunt.
That's great.
So,
your lifestyle is closer to, you're sort of an amalgam of modern industrial technological society, and you definitely have elements of traditional values and traditional family structure.
Yeah.
Now, one of the big differences between typical American families, and you are not necessarily so typical.
Right.
One of the big differences is that in traditional families and indigenous families, these are what are known as extended families. And the way you've been talking, I would say that your family is much more like an extended family, meaning that there are several generations. So in a typical traditional family, extended family, you have children, you have parents, you have aunts, uncles, cousins all over the place. They tend to have a lot of children. Hey, they need them. They have a lot of them. And their grandparents, as long as they survive. And this is a unit. And so, whereas we live, I don't know, we have to be careful because you're in
I'm a mix. That's why I have a mix. That's why I said I'm bicultural. Because even though I was born in New York City, I'm an American, right? And I was raised with American traditions, things like that. But our family was it was very important for my grandmother to make sure that the traditions from the family kept going to generation. So like I kept the cooking. I do authentic Puerto Rican cooking. I do my grandmother's recipes. I've altered them to make them. Sometimes I make vegan stuff now, but I still have the same spices. And so I've changed them up to make them healthier now. But so I've adapted that, but I still do that. And my son, who's 23, works as a general manager at a restaurant, and he's cooking also. Yeah. And I saw him the other day and I said, he goes, oh, Ma, I cook in the back when the line is busy. And I'm like, looked at him going, wow, so my influence in him, because he would cook with me when he was little. He goes, Mama, how do I make that? How do I make rice and beans? How do I do this? So he would watch me in the kitchen and I would help him. Okay, you can bread the chicken cutlets or you can do this. So they would always help me in that. So I just kept bringing that culture, the stuff that grandma taught me, because I was raised with both grandparents.
So Alita, you just in passing, you brought up another very important point about the thing that really made a big impression on me in this book. And this has been a matter of great interest to anthropologists as well. So the question is, how do traditional children learn? No schools. So how do they learn? I just said the parents, as a generalization, the parents think it's not my responsibility to raise them. They give them to an older sibling. send them to be with the children's group? Is this considered to be a dereliction of parental duty? No, this is how these societies do things. But so, well, how are the children? So, one thing I should just caveat here is that one thing that traditional parents do take responsibility for is manners and morals. This they care about. Now, the children are probably also getting it from the other children, but this is particularly important because, and I would imagine in your own experience, this is true. The older people get a lot of respect, and we have to show them respect. Well, how do you do that? Sometimes this involves some ritual behaviors, things that you really need to say. And, I know in some traditional families, the older people eat first and then everybody else eats. There's all kinds of ways to.
We were always, like I used to say, when we used to go somewhere, we had the little discussion before we left the house. So it was, grandma would say, okay, we're going to so-and-so's house. You know the rules. You behave, no screaming, polite. So usually we would come and they're like, oh, your kids are so well behaved. I'm like, yeah, because they taught us that we respect somebody else's house. You don't touch anything that's not yours. And you respect the people of the house, like certain guidelines. And I did that to my kids as well. I would tell my kids to do this or do not do that and so on.
Well, traditional parents, just as in your experience, do tend to care a lot about their children learning manners and morals. But beyond that, as a big generalization, they don't pay very much attention. They don't protect them. They don't give them stuff. Kids have the run of the camp with the other children all day long. Do they take turns looking out for them and being sure that a tiger isn't going to pounce on them from the forest? No, they don't. The children take care of themselves.
It's like growing up in New York. When we grew up, like in the 70s in New York, it's a whole different generation. We used to go to the park. We used to get scraped up and get all roughed up because you're playing in the asphalt and everything. And our parents didn't go with us to the park. We used to go to the park with our friends, but other parents knew the kids, like everybody knew everybody in the neighborhood. So if Johnny did something wrong, Mary's parents would scold Johnny and then go to your house and tell him, I scolded him because he did this. Okay. And then they would scold him again. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like there was everybody kind of took care of everybody.
Yeah. So I was picking up on something that you said just in passing, and you said, I believe referring to your son, that he watched you cooking. This is the answer to how other children learn. They watch, they observe, then they try to do it themselves privately or in groups of 2 or 3, whatever it is. And this has been of great interest to scholars because this is how they learn. And it's actually been given a name. There's a scholar out in one of the universities in California that's taken a particular interest in this, and she's come up with an acronym, LOPI, L-O-P-I. That stands for Learning by Observation and Pitching In. And traditional children learn an enormous amount, really pretty much everything they need to know. And so I can imagine people saying, and I mean, I was a parent, my kids are all grown up and gone now, but lost my train of thought there.
About learning the LOPI. You were talking about the LOPI, about pitching in and how they learn.
Anyway, I forgot where I was going with that. Sorry.
Sorry.
Anyway, but the things they have to learn, which are myriad, we're not just talking about a few things, how to boil an egg, or how to bring a twig for the fire. The things they have to learn are many. They require taking responsibility. They but kids in every culture are able to learn this way, and they do learn this way. Now, so what is the big difference? The big difference is that our ancestors began to change, and we find ourselves now living in a highly industrialized, technological society. And the only way for children to survive in this society is by becoming literate, by becoming numerate, by learning the things that you need to know. These are academic things, these are technical things. You learn them in school. This kind of knowledge is not necessary in traditional societies.
But
So the kids learn everything they need to know by LOPI, learning by observation and pitching in. And you can also think about trial and error. And but when they finally get around to trying to pitch in, they're generally welcomed, even though they're kind of bumbling and don't get things right, because hey, they are needed. They are needed. Now, and again, you're really an example of this. I often say, in almost all the interviews I give about this book, I say, in their American society, American middle class society doesn't live that way anymore. But in the United States and in other developed countries as well, there is one type of family which in many ways is living a traditional lifestyle, in which the children have these kinds of opportunities to watch, to learn, to pitch in, to take responsibility, to contribute. And I am talking about family farms that raise animals.
yeah.
And I think this is your experience.
Yep. Yeah, because that still goes on, like in the islands, in Puerto Rico, it's not as much as it used to be, but there's still families still have farms and animals and livestock, basically, or just produce, or food growing,
Right.
which I love. So there's still some of that going on,
Yeah. So in our society and in other Western European societies, it's often said that these societies are highly individualistic. In other words, the fundamental value structure of the society puts emphasis on the individual and what they want and their aspirations and what they need. And I've gotten so aware of this that I hear commercials on the radio, I hear commercials on television sometimes, and they're just so heavily pitched to the individual. We take care of your needs. We understand you. Our hospital gets to know you, or our bank gets to know you, just so we can do exactly what you want and need for your future. This is heavy value system of individualism. But in a traditional society and in a extended family, that value system often is known as communitarian. And the ethos of that kind of society, the value structure is not what I want is what I need. It's what I want is what we need.
Yeah.
It's all about we. And the real focus of that we is on the extended family.
Yeah.
Now it's also on the community, maybe the larger polity, but the family, the extended family is the thing.
Right.
What I want is what we need.
That's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because now I believe, at least my opinion, that our traditional for families, that family has broken, because not a lot of people don't have grandparents around, or
Yes.
people are having children later in life. So because of that, you've broken the tradition of having your grandparents and uncles.
Yeah.
Because by the time you have a child, they're already passed. So I tell people I had my grandparents, they're like, oh, you're so lucky. I never met my grandparents. I actually met my great grandmother.
Oh, wow.
And so I
And
was
you
able to,
remember that?
and I remember that, yes. I
Wow.
was about 7 or 8 years old, and I remember going to her house in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can see her vividly, you know. But
Wow.
so
How
I
old was
cherish.
she at the time?
I don't know. Probably, I mean, she was up there. She was older.
Oh, I'm sure.
I don't know. She was in her 80s, maybe
Yeah.
younger, because the people had children younger back then. So
Yeah.
I don't, she could have been only, 15 years older than my grandmother, you know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I know she had Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia, because she didn't recognize. Every day she would go, who are you? Who are you? And she's like, I'm your daughter. I don't know you, like, and I would be like, I'm your great granddaughter, so I remember those things
Yeah.
too. But I'm just watching the time because I have another interview coming up soon, so I don't want to. But this has been an incredible conversation. Just quickly, because I have like 5 minutes left here. So with all this research and this book, do you think that there's something we can do in our society today to help our children and our parents?
I think what reading my book, certainly researching and writing my book, but also I certainly hope reading my book, with the single exception of what we were talking about, responsibility, where I think that in order to have children who are willing and able to take responsibility, families and parents need to start really young, asking of children, asking them to do things, asking them to contribute. This is your experience growing up, and as I hear you explain, it's your children's experience growing up as well. Beyond that, I'm very loath to say, yes, there's other things we can copy, because the circumstances, the physical, the ecological, the value systems in which they live are so unlike ours. But what this does, I think one of the most important realizations I came up with is that we really undervalue children. Children are able to do things. They are able to take responsibility. They are able to be a part of the group and make their contributions, even in major ways. I mean, the Quechua, at age 8 or 9, a child will be sent with the herd to the fields for the entire day. You know what that herd is to that family? That's their entire wealth in the care of a child.
Yep.
Under 10. So I think it says to us, do we need to, well, one of the things that I came up with, and I think this might actually be original with me, is I came up with this little saying: middle-class American parents parent as much as possible. Traditional parents parent as little as possible, because the children take much more responsibility for themselves. They're contributing. And boy, in so many ways, it's not that we can copy, but we can look at these things and say, wow, I mean, I put so much time and effort, and we spend so much money and anxiety on parents and taking 24/7 responsibility for these children. Do we, maybe we don't actually have to do all of this. Maybe there's some middle ground in here. I think what my book does is getting people to pause and say, well, let's step back and kind of look at the whole thing that's going on here. And maybe no, we can't be just like them. That's out, except maybe for the responsibility bit. But we can rethink, reevaluate.
Exactly. And enable and let your children enable themselves, that they have the capability, like you're saying. A child has a brain, and they're educated. The same thing, I mean, people train their dogs to do tricks and do things, right? So I mean, your children are capable. Here, Johnny, take a glass of water, put it in the sink, let's clean up. I used to do that with my kids. Come on, we're cleaning up the room. And they're like, what do we do? I said, okay, honey, you take this, that's garbage, you put it in the garbage. This toy goes in the shelf. So I would do things with them because you need to teach them how to do it. You can't just say, Johnny, go clean the bathroom. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, and there has been actual research on this with modern children. They're willing and able to do this. It makes them part of the group.
Oh, wait, I got another person coming in. I gotta stop.
Okay.
Hold on.
All right. Well, I hope your readers will remember how other children learn. And the book actually has a website, howotherchildrenlearn.info. Howotherchildrenlearn.info.
So I will put that all when I upload the podcast and all your information. I have your website and everything about the book.
Okay,
so I really
let me know.
Appreciate your time, and it was an awesome conversation. And we'll get in touch again so we can talk more. I love all this.
Yes, it's so interesting. Thank you so much, Alita.
All right, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Come celebrate your event and create new memories at Studio 33, right here in Fort Lauderdale, off the Exit 32 Commercial Boulevard. Call us today so you can schedule an appointment and see the location. It's an intimate setting for your private event. Call us at 954-530-7193. Again, 954-530-7193. Also, our website is studio33f as in Frank, ll.com. And you can find us on all social media at Studio 33 FLL as well. Again, call us today for your appointment and come see our venue. We are filling up fast.